So the only addition I know of to the agenda is we'll add it under reports presentation. Sorry, Katrina, I didn't give you time to start recording. We'll add it under reports presentation and updates. That will be Nick Hemholt and reps from ECCE giving us an update about the broadband study. So that will be D under reports, presentations, and updates. Any other additions to the agenda?
I would like to just say a brief comment at some point regarding proposed changes to the assessment procedures. It might be something that TCOG would want to weigh in on at a later time.
Maybe we'll do that. I know that Jay is here and we'll probably, well, okay, we'll do that after Jay's presentation if it's a brief comment.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what we reviewed the agenda, we've signed in, so we'll just, we'll move toward the minutes, approval of the minutes from August 25th, 2022. Would someone like to move the minutes? I saw Mark. Mark, is there a second? Robert, any comments? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Anyone abstaining or opposing? Okay, moving on to report from county administration. Lisa, Shauna, Lisa, anything to report on that's not on the agenda already?
Sure. I do have a few brief updates from county administration. So the county's budget process is wrapping up with a 0% tax levy increase slated. There will be a public hearing on the budget coming up on at the November 1st meeting, and the vote for the legislature to pass the budget will be on November 15th. A couple of items in the budget that may be of particular interest to TCOG members. The budget includes funding for in the county for a homeless services coordinator. That person's role will be to coordinate efforts across county departments regarding homelessness, and particularly the encampments that are in the city and springing up in surrounding towns. So to coordinate those efforts across county departments. Also includes funding for an EMS program manager under the Department of Emergency Response, again, to provide support to local volunteer and paid EMS providers. And much of that came from the work of the TCOG subcommittee. So I know you're very much aware of the issues in that work. And then one other item I just wanted to plant the seed or bring to folks' attention. In a meeting with our Department of Emergency Response this morning, they have funding in their 2023 budget where they intend to work with a consultant to update the comprehensive emergency management plan for the county. And that includes an update and rewrite to the base plan. And they would like to include annexes in the plan specific to each municipality in the county, which would be an opportunity to have specific work with the municipalities, or enable the municipalities to have time to work with a consultant to update, or in some cases construct an emergency plan specific to the vulnerabilities of each specific municipality, and have that be a part of a comprehensive countywide emergency plan, which would be critical framework in the event that there were an emergency either across the county or across certain municipalities, critical framework for FEMA reimbursement after such an event. So this is just something that is in the works or in the planning for Department of Emergency Response for consideration within their 2023 budget. They have the funding for it, and they would be very willing to come to a future meeting of TCOG to provide more information to our municipal partners about an opportunity to work with a consultant and help with this. So I think that's all I've got for today.
So questions for Lisa?
And Shauna, I wasn't sure if you had any other updates on behalf of the county you wanted to throw in there.
I don't think so. I think the most important ones that pertain to many of the people on the call are the EMS coordinator. Also, we have increased the budget for road patrol, and we're going to be adding 2 more deputies. So I think that we're hoping that that's going to help with some of reaching our rural areas a little bit better. And I believe Derek was talking about adding them to the shift that essentially we're seeing the most action on. Oh, let's see here. Yeah, I mean, we're a few weeks out from passing the budget, and I'm really glad that we were able to find balance. And for the most part, people should not be seeing an increase in their tax bill. So we're happy to do that.
Questions for Shauna? Thank you, Shauna. Moving on to the first presentation. This is David Herrick and Kurt Anderson talking about the 2020 water and sewer evaluation update. So I'll turn it over to, I don't know who's going to go first. David, Kurt?
Kurt?
I think I heard my name from the other room. Yeah.
And we've been told this will take about 15 minutes. So
Yeah, is
Okay.
David here? I can't see him in the
yeah,
square.
David's here. Yeah.
He is, okay, good. Hey, I'm Kurt Anderson, Director of Operations for Ithkari Economic Development. This is the second iteration of being contracted by the county effectively to map water and sewer systems and progress towards improvements. The first being in 2010, the second being 2020, this version, which we did start that year, but obviously a few things got in the way, and that got delayed through the course of 2021 and even into 2022 to conduct all the interviews with the various systems operators and municipalities, et cetera. So this is the final version of that draft, the second draft, 2020 update. The difference between the two documents, whereas the first one, the 2010 version, excuse me, was just pretty much a checklist of what's out there and what could, what progress had been made over the last decade. This version covers that ground as well on what's changed in the last decade, but it also seeks to create a checklist, kind of a low-hanging fruit priority list of opportunities that would get the biggest bang for the buck. That if we put rubber to road or money to project, that we'd serve the most folks in the county. So again, this is just a little bit of change there so that we can actually take that list and then visit with municipalities about getting stuff done instead of just creating a document that sits on a shelf and collects dust for another decade. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David. He's going to kind of go through some of the methods and the results, and then we'll open it up for discussion, and I'll join them. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Kurt. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here and speak with you and hopefully answer any questions you might have when we're done. I first want to acknowledge the assistance, help, and support that we received from the County Department of Planning and Sustainability. Wouldn't have gotten here without their help and their input. So thank you first to all the folks. Many of them I see are on the call today. Also, this PDF of the slide presentation I've made available to Katrina. So if anyone wants to obtain this slideshow, it's available.
And David, it was sent out with the agenda.
Pardon me?
It was sent out with the agenda, so everyone has it.
Okay, this slideshow,
Oh,
Uh,
I'm
the full
sorry, the report.
the report, right.
I'll send the slideshow out to all members after the meeting.
Sure. Yeah, so Kurt succinctly stated the differences between what we did in 2010 to what we've since updated. And just going back very quickly, the 2010 was really a snapshot and understanding of the limits and challenges that the municipal systems were faced with at that time, and how those capacity challenges were potentially limiting the support of new housing growth. There was a significant focus in the 2010 study as to how capacities in water and sewer systems could facilitate additional growth, which is certainly important here in the county, continues to be important. And that really was the focus. The subtle changes, or maybe not so subtle, with the 2020 update is that we did spend a considerable amount of time integrating our focus with what the county was developing concurrently with the resiliency and recovery plan. And in this 2020 update, we did, and you will find that there's been a focus on the key urban center water purveyors, namely Bolton Point, the city of Ithaca, and the Cornell water system. And the last item here in looking at forward looking priority objectives, we're not suggesting as recommendations or findings of the study that there's any inherent urgency in fulfilling some of the infrastructure improvement work. And certainly it's not intended to be a mandate in any way, but we want to see over time, as Kurt suggested, that there's an ability to keep this a dynamic living document and not a dust collector. So our approach for completing this update was to get to municipal officials and staff and operators, those that were willing to participate and available. Again, we had to do it under the veil of the pandemic, but we did get good information from most of the municipalities on their current system capacities and new challenges. Many of the 2010 challenges that were documented in that report, for the better of everyone, a lot of them were completed. There's been a lot of positive, progressive work in making infrastructure improvements as they're needed. Relative to looking at housing growth, we had the benefit of understanding what's known as the 2020 housing snapshot, which included housing data from 2016 to 2020. And it helped us to understand where the distribution of housing, new housing, is relative to the availability of both water and sewer access. And as I mentioned, a large focus of this update is on the urban core water purveyors, which was the result of the 2016 drought. At that time, I think, as we all may recall, there were some concerns about how our surface water systems were going to be able to keep up with demands in 2016. And it brought some focus on that situation and what the challenges are between the three core water providers. And it's leading towards understanding redundancy and resiliency. Redundancy became more clear as we were able to speak with the water system operators. It's not just about water flowing out of Cayuga Lake to help other creek source purveyors, because even Bolton Point has certain challenges and limitations, which we'll get to in a minute. Relative to development focus areas, I'm going to make an assumption that everybody knows what a DFA is. These are nodes for urban centers, rural centers, emerging nodes throughout the county that have been identified as locations for additional growth in housing. And what we did glean from the 2020 housing snapshot was that a large majority, as you can imagine, of the new housing growth has been within the urban center, which is in this illustration, the red footprint. In looking at the availability of water supply and wastewater treatment facilities, we made some predictions of what additional opportunities there may be to support water and wastewater connections for new housing growth. And in the study, you would find that we estimate roughly 13,000 plus housing units could be connected to a water supply only throughout these DFAs. And relative to wastewater, roughly 18,000 housing units. And when you combine the availability of both water and sewer connection and capacity, which we believe is needed for reasonable housing growth potential, we're looking at roughly 12,000 housing units that could today have the ability to hook up to both water and sewer. And the expectation is that the urban core, the urban center, would likely continue to be have the greatest potential for that housing growth with both water and sewer. Just to put it in perspective, in 2010, we had a similar estimate of roughly 12,800 housing units, or the equivalent of housing units being able to connect to both water and sewer. One thing I would like to point out relative to this estimate of housing units is the metric that is behind these numbers. Back in 2010, we were looking at roughly 325 gallons per day in water consumption or sewage generation as being the base number for coming up with these number of potential housing connections. Now, by today's standards, that 325 is overly conservative. Water saving fixtures, smaller household size would suggest that our number of roughly 11,750 could be grown in response to a lower demand per housing unit. One other presentation we have made brought up the question of how do these number of connections relate to commercial, industrial, and business growth. And we didn't go there. That wasn't one of the aims of the 2010 study, nor this 2020 update, but we've expressed everything here in terms of a housing unit or an equivalent dwelling unit. The county had initiated in 2019 and had completed concurrently with our 2020 update, the resiliency and recovery plan. And I would just point out that as we were conducting interviews with some of the facility operators, we had representation from the Department of Planning and Sustainability. And we found that there was common ground in some of our objectives and goals relative to looking at improving the water system redundancy, specifically during drought conditions. And the county RRP really speaks more to drought planning from a countywide perspective. Our 2020 update is more specific in suggesting infrastructure opportunities to enhance supply redundancy. This county tech memo, as it's referred to, is it's attached in its entirety to our 2020 update. So again, looking back at intermunicipal and interagency planning and the 2016 drought, we learned that it's a two-way street, and our water systems need to flow in both directions. And we were given some insight into how certain facilities between the three water purveyors could be enhanced or improved. So not only do they provide resiliency during emergency situations, but redundancy. And so you'll find in the full study that there's some descriptions and discussions of things that would need to be done, primarily with the Bolton Point treatment plant and system, to make the three systems operate with greater resiliency and improved redundancy. And relative to the third point here, the third bullet, the water sharing agreements are more fully expressed or explained in the county RRP. There's some other aspects of the 2020 update that we've touched on here. The EPA lead and copper rule revision, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is coming up. Some obligations to be completed by the end of next year, or 2024, excuse me. There's also the draft TMDL, and what are the implications for some of our wastewater treatment facilities if that is to be progressed and implemented. And another reference is to what the Department of Planning and Sustainability has done relative to infrastructure assets that might be exposed to flooding events. So the objectives that have been summarized in the update relative to water system resiliency, again, are focused on the three counties urban center purveyors. And while we have identified some of these planning objectives and possible improvements, they are in no way an indication of urgency or should any way be considered a mandate, if you will. But these are identified, and we hope that in subsequent years, as Kurt mentioned, that the study can be used to help inform how to consider planning, and even potentially be used in support of funding applications, together with some of the other county studies that have been done. There are a few recommendations relative to some of the smaller rural communities to improve their water supply resiliency. Some of the items that we had identified in the update have actually been completed in the last 18 months since we initially documented them. And relative to wastewater treatment, we have learned and heard many, many times that inflow and infiltration in the sanitary sewer systems is becoming a greater and greater issue and is presenting challenges to not just the municipal collection systems, but the wastewater treatment facilities. And we see an opportunity here, and this is going to be a intermunicipal effort to tackle this issue. And I know it's in process in many of the municipalities, but in order to avoid the extreme expense of upgrading treatment facilities to treat stormwater and groundwater, we need to tighten up our pipes. So we've suggested here that, and I know it's actually in process, that many of the municipalities are looking to find funding either on their own or through something like the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation to fund these I&I investigations. So that wraps up what we wanted to share today, and certainly would like to hear any comments, questions.
Okay, great. Maybe you can stop, Sharon, then it will be easier to see who might have a question. So thank you, David and Kurt. So questions, comments?
Sure, I got a quick question here. How well does the ability to provide water and sewer match up with the areas where we would like to see the development? Because having capacity in the system doesn't mean it's capacity where we need it.
So David or Kurt, do one of you want to respond to that?
The summation of our anticipated connection ability for housing units was developed within those areas that currently have both water and sewer. So if extensions of water and sewer systems need to be made beyond the current limits of the infrastructure, that would only add to the ability to support more housing. So we've looked at this from the perspective of what is there today, and as opposed to what might need to be extended beyond current service limits. So from a perspective of maintaining or minimizing sprawl or growth in rural and suburban areas, we've looked at what could be done within the existing urban center and established nodes.
Okay, other questions, comments? Robert?
One question that might come up, a number of towns, including our town of Enfield, have population nodes which are well separated from any public water supply or sewer supply. And I'll focus on water because it's the more important priority in most cases. For example, we out at Enfield Center, we've got a number of community houses that are in close proximity to each other. They rely on wells, but there is a question about the adequacy of that well water system. And I haven't heard of any effort, for example, to run a line from the city of Ithaca up to Enfield Center, which would be a long haul for water development there, or sewer development for that matter. And it does hinge on a number of towns, including ours, development regulation plans, because when you bring a water line, that means that you can have more intense population development. And I didn't know if there was any concern or consideration in this study to extending water or sewer lines out to the more distant hamlets.
No, is a short answer. Again, we were looking to focus on the infrastructure that is currently in place without trying to predict or assume what communities might want to do with extensions as you described. Not to say that those can't happen, but in looking at what we have today for our current infrastructure and capacities, that was our focus on what we have at this present.
Thank you.
And David and Kurt, if folks do have follow-up questions, they can reach out to you. I'm assuming that's correct.
Oh, yeah, and we'll point them to the study can be a little heavy to read, but if you've got a specific question, we'll point you in the right direction in that study.
Well, it's a lengthy study, so that's good. But yes, the PowerPoint presentation will be good because we can share it with other municipal leaders in each of our municipalities. So thanks for getting that. So Katrina, I know you're going to send that to us. I'm sorry, I think we're going to move on just because we do have a number of topics. So thank you, David and Kurt. for your time. You're welcome to stay on, but we're not expecting you to, so your choice.
Thanks.
I'll take advantage of the opportunity to thank everyone here too, as individuals and representing your staff for the help that you shared with us in pulling together this information.
Great, good. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
So Jay, I think we're ready to move on to an exemption discussion, and then we'll see what question or comment that Robert wanted to put on the table as well. But go ahead, Jay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to come before you because it's a lot easier for me than going to 16 different municipalities. So I'm more than willing to come out anytime that you want. You've heard my spiel before. I'm really a town employee, just the county puts money in my pocket. So with that being said, I just wanted to bring this back. I checked at lunch today, and the volunteer firefighter EMT exemption that we had talked about before has not been delivered yet to the governor's office to be signed. You know, this is an election year, so I highly doubt anything else is going to go before her before election in order to have her signature put on it or have her veto. So we'll have to wait until after the election and then see what happens. But I wanted to get this for you before you. For whatever reason, deep down in me, I'm trying to get this exemption to be somewhat standard from municipality to municipality. Typically, I'm more than willing to juggle whatever exemptions, local options you want, but this one just seems like consistency would be better off. I don't want to have to tell a surviving spouse that, yes, you can get the exemption for county and school, but the town of Groton decided not to do that. So, you know, it's just one of those things. And there's not a whole lot of local options in here. But I met with Jess Verfus from Dewar. I'm going to be meeting with the fire chiefs on November 15th. We have to come up with a process in order to determine who these volunteers are, what sort of classification we can meet in order for the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, to be able to tell me that these are eligible volunteers in their district that should be eligible for this exemption. Now, that kind of gives me pause as well, because I'm almost ceding some of my authority to someone else to say this person should be getting that exemption. But I have some confidence in our fire chiefs and our Department of Emergency Response to ensure that the list that we get are actual true volunteers. You know, we don't want the ones to show up, you know, every 6 months to fire hall at their picnics. But we want to make sure that we actually get those volunteers that come, they put in the training, they go to calls when they can, and make sure that they're eligible to get that exemption. So included in here with a couple of local options, you could go up to a 10% break, but I figured we could go with that 10% break because that was common in the prior 20%. You know, I see no reason why the unremarried spouse who died in the line of duty or either died after 20 years of service shouldn't continue it. That's very similar to the veterans exemption. The unremarried spouse can continue their exemption on, so as long as their primary residence stays at house. And also with the life member as well. I don't know the impact of this. From talking to Jess, most of the EMT workers in the county are paid, so it wouldn't really affect them. Most of the firefighters in the city of Ithaca are paid, maybe even Cuba Heights as well. I'm learning more and more about our EMT services as well. So, but, you know, I said, if I looked at the county and said, if 200 volunteers took advantage of this exemption, it's really not an effect on the tax bill for the county purposes. But as we get closer and this kind of comes up, if you have any questions, once it's signed into law, we should be able to start passing this. But if you want me to take a look at what the impact may be on your municipality, just give me a yell as well. Like the same thing we did with the increased senior and disability limits. But that's about it. So stay tuned. I'll probably send something out to you after I meet with Jess, at least on the 15th, and the fire chief. So we'll keep you updated.
Any quick questions for Jay about that? Gordon?
Yeah, just real quick, Jay, is there any coordination between your office, and I know you do the assessment for town of Covert, but any coordination between your office and assessments in the other counties? And I'm just thinking about, Trumansburg Fire Company has whatever, 60 or 75 active members, but I would guess, and this is a wild guess, but I would guess, maybe only 20% of them live in Tompkins County.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious how that might be. Is my fire chief going to have to send this list to 3 counties, depending on however they decide to set up their processes, or are you able to help with some coordination at that level?
They're going to have to provide it to 3 different counties. Hopefully the list, there's not too many ways to come up with this. It's really in cooperation with that AHJ. I like acronyms now that I learned that one. I get to say it all the time. But with that, but I'll talk to the 2 other directors in Schuyler and Seneca County and see what they're thinking, and I'll get back to you on that, Rorden. But yeah, that's a great idea. It shouldn't be left up to come up with the volunteer list and how to coordinate that, but I don't know of a better way to do it. But I'll reach out to Kelly and Lisa over there and see what they're doing and get back to you.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Joanne?
Would an unmarried widow of a volunteer firefighter who died a few years ago qualify for this exemption moving forward?
No, I don't believe so, because they wouldn't be classified as a volunteer by the time the local law was passed. So I don't think we can go retroactively, but this is a new exemption, and I'll reach out to New York State. I'll probably get the response. Check with your local municipal attorney, but I'll at least try New York State and see what we get.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mark? And you're on mute, Mark.
Sorry, just following up on Rawdon's question, Jay, do you expect other counties to be going for the same level of exemption for this so that it's consistent?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, 20 counties already had something similar to this that was removed, and they'll have to adopt this provision of the law as opposed to the one that they had.
Mhm.
So in what I'm seeing on the county director listserv, I'm pretty sure the majority of places will do this. For what it's worth there, but we'll see.
Okay, great, thanks.
And Robert, you wanted to put something on the table, assessment related.
Yes, we've got a good opportunity because Jay Franklin's in our meeting. I wondered if you could give us the condensed Reader's Digest version of the assessment changes that are going to be planned for next year that you've talked about to the Government Operations Committee of the county legislature.
Yep. So as everyone's aware, we're in a hot real estate market still, or really we were as of July 1 of 2022, which is what our 2023 assessment roll will be based on. So the vast majority of residential parcels will be revalued this year. It'll be a mixture of trending and reappraisal. So we'll be sending out those notices in February, probably again. We'll send out the assessment disclosure notices again, which shows the impact of changing your and everybody else's assessment on your prior year bills. It doesn't look at an increase in a tax levy for future years, but just what would have happened to your tax bill if that was in. We're going to set up our informal assessment reviews. It'll be up to the property owner to present us with something this time around in order to come and talk to one of us in our office. We found that the vast majority of our informal assessment reviews are pretty much waste of time. The property owner will come in and say, our taxes are too high. We say our taxes are too high too, and where do we go from here? Let's take a look at your assessment. So we're going to stop that at the beginning, let the property owner present something to us, and then we'll review it. If we have questions, we contact them. And one step that we'll do above and beyond that this year is if we don't change someone's preliminary assessment, We're going to mail out comparable sales for them to review in case they want to go to the grievance. They'll know exactly the sales that we use in order to value their property for this upcoming year. And then also with that, I'm going to take another look at the local boards of assessment review. We really didn't have a whole lot of activity out there. You know, they were a great thing when they were created back in 1968 when we went to countywide assessment. But I think more people are willing to file grievances either online. You know, we were the first assessing unit in New York State to allow the online grievance submission. More people are willing just to come and talk to us throughout the year to have their assessment looked at. So there's something of the past. And, you know, quite frankly, when we were at 19 individuals in my office, we had a little more staffing to be able to handle that. But now that we're reduced down to 13 individuals, the month of May is just crazy for us, trying to be able to manage, you know, 2 to 3 nightly meetings a week when it takes 2 to 3 of us at least to be out there. So I'm going to put a little more data together, go back to GO and let them make that decision on whether to continue or not.
Okay,
Jay,
thank you, Jay. Is
I
this a
may-
quick question, Robert? We do need to move
Yes,
on.
just want to advise Jay and Shauna that our Enfield Town Board last night unanimously passed a resolution urging that the local advisory boards of assessment review be continued.
Okay, so we'll stay tuned on getting more information from your office, Jay.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank you. So Darby, I think you're up next to give us an update on the building code administration study.
Great, thanks, Rod. Darby Kiley here from the Tompkins County Department of Planning and Sustainability. And yes, Rod said the name, the Building Code Administration Study has kicked off with a request for proposals that went out last month. And last week we received the proposals. We got 4 of them. And we are interviewing all 4 of the proposals because they're all really great. And we had a hard time just from paper making a decision. So those interviews are underway. And just so you know who the we are in this, we have 6 county staff on a steering committee. So that includes me and Katie Borgella from our department and Liz Cameron from Environmental Health, Alana Cogden from the clerk's office, Jay Franklin from assessment with his, I've seen 3 different colored sweater vests this week already and for Jay, and Bridget Nugent from the administration office. And then we have 3 municipal partners. So that includes Mark Whitmer from Town of Caroline, CJ Randall, the Director of Planning from the Town of Lansing, and Marty Mosley, Director of Code Enforcement for the Town of Ithaca. So got a really great group, getting some good feedback as we're moving through the process. And I wanted to really come to you guys today that although this is, you know, similar to what Jay just said, this is a county funded project, but it's really intended to benefit the municipalities and to work with you to think about what the future of code enforcement is in your community, and then also the role of a code enforcement officer. We know they do much more than just issuing building permits. So what does floodplain management, your stormwater program look like moving into the future? So I highly encourage you, as you're contacted by either me, but then also with an introduction to our consultants, to make sure you make the time to work with them for interviews. We'll be interviewing the head elected officials or whoever you feel is the designated representative for your department or for your municipality, but then also the code officials. So really want to make sure we get time with them to be able to be receiving the best data and information about what they do on a day-to-day basis, what your budgets look like, that kind of thing. So well, we have to sign a contract before the middle of December. So we'll be getting that underway probably before the end of November, but really be kicking off in early 2023. So I'll take any questions if anyone has one.
So when we meet early December, you'll know which firm has been chosen and can give us just a brief update.
Sure, could, yes.
Okay. Questions? Joel.
Can you give us some idea how the proposals differ?
Not a whole lot. I mean, really comes down to who's on the project team, and I think just meeting with them, and these are virtual interviews, but really getting a sense of what we see as the project team and working with them, how that could look moving into the future.
And the
So
objectives
we
for
very deep. Oh, sorry. go ahead.
I'm sorry, the objectives are, let me just ask a different way. What are the objectives of the study?
Yeah, great. It's really to look at a range of options. So in the scope of work and the request for proposals, we had a range of 4 to 6 options that are looking at increased efficiencies or shared services that could be developed, and to move forward with, like, what are the costs of those services, what are MOUs required. If there's an option, that comes from everyone that looks, or from a majority of folks, that consolidated code enforcement is something to pursue, we'll look at what that could mean. But we know that potential option on the table doesn't have to be a foregone conclusion if that's not direction for a majority of people. And I know Katie and I don't always agree on this one, but it is, we just want to see, like, what is the future of code enforcement. If you're all seeing retirements in the next 5 years, what do you want your services to be moving into the future?
Excellent, thanks.
Katie, when somebody reveals themselves, I think they want to say something.
The big reveal. I would just add that I think in the interview process, we're trying to find consultants who are good at listening, and we'll go in with very open minds to the conversations with municipal partners to listen for ways that something consolidated or new software or whatever it may be can truly help the majority of the municipalities.
Other questions, comments? So Mark, thank you for being on the committee. And I know that the Town of Ithaca Code Enforcement, Marty at Mosley, is pleased to be on the committee as well. So thank you, Darby. So maybe we'll get a brief update in December when we meet.
Yes, I can let you guys know if we selected someone, we have a contract, we'll definitely provide an update.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
So now we're moving on to broadband. So I'll turn it over to Nick Hemholtz.
Thanks, Rod. So we wanted to share an update on where the county's efforts are relating to broadband, to bring TCOG up to speed on what's happened since our last update, which was a memo shared back in August. So with me today, we have Justin from ECC Technologies. And we're gonna just give a little bit of an overview of what's happened in the last couple of months, and just a little preview of what's on the horizon as well. So just a quick thumbnail, and then I'm gonna ask Justin to sort of fill in some of the details. We've been working internally here at the county on broadband. We have a steering committee made up of myself, Katie Borgella, Bridget Nugent, Greg Potter, and Kurt Anderson. And we're working in consultation with ECC Technologies, based out of Penfield, New York, to focus on what we can do to expand broadband access to the approximately 1,400 locations in the county we believe are currently lacking broadband access. And that's based on the data we have from New York State. Sorry, here I'm just kind of getting a little frog in my throat. The major development that's happened since August is that we launched our the Broadband Availability and Adoption Tool, or the BAT, more informally known as the Broadband Survey. And hopefully you've seen some of the promotion we've done about it for tompkinsbroadband.com. If you haven't, we'll send you the link in the press release and everything else afterwards, and ask you that you please share that within your networks. This is a sort of a two-step survey. The first step being a internet speed test, where you can use a widget on the website to test the upload and download speed of your current connection at home or at work. And the second part being a survey where you answer a series of questions about your internet availability, who your provider is, and satisfaction overall with services you have. So that launched on September 14th. We've been doing promotion through networks throughout the county, currently working closely with school districts. Over the last week and a half, basically been focused on getting all of the school districts based in the county to help promote this and getting flyers out to students at the Ithaca City School District and also to families at other school districts as well. Our goal basically with the survey is to get approximately, and Justin, correct me if I got the number flipped around here, 2,100 responses to the survey, and to have that done by or before mid-December of this year. And that will really help us inform the next steps going forward. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're gathering information. There have been some other efforts that ECC has been working on as well. We are currently working with them and looking forward to in the next month or so, beginning to evaluate some of the options. I should also mention one of the other pieces we've been promoting as well as the survey is that there are programs out there for low-income households and other households to get discounted internet services through the FCC. So we've been trying to push those out through our channels through the school districts as well to let them know that that's available for anyone who qualifies. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Justin, could you anything you want to fill in there or add on?
Sure. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. And thank you everybody for having me. This is fantastic. Nick, you did a great job. You stole a lot of my talking points.
Sorry.
But I'll go briefly through some of the deliverables, and then we'll get into the details, and I'll actually show you a little bit of a map that we have available to give you some visualization on exactly what we're doing. But part of deliverable number one, obviously, is getting the infrastructure laid out into a KMZ file, which eventually will transfer into an ArcGIS file that the county will have available to them. This begins with verification of New York State DPS data. As you may know or may not know, New York State did a survey, but that was conducted through ECC Technologies. Because of the way the data has to be transferred, the county took ownership of that data, and now we're going back and we're reviewing it. So what we did was we had a field re-verification of this data. So we sent people back out into the field to verify exactly what happened within the last time frame that was conducted versus now. Upon completion, we'll identify all the roads and addresses that do not have access to the needed infrastructure for broadband. So those will be down to the address level. You will no longer have to worry about the FCC census block data. We intend to provide the total miles of the infrastructure and the needed cost budgets, targeting November 4th for this information. And the list of addresses will be mid-November. So we'll have all that data available and ready to go. So we're moving quickly, and that's progressing well. Deliverable 2 is really a review, discussion of funding options. What are the different paths forward? Looking at that. So we'll begin identifying these potential options, building the operating infrastructure, securing partnerships with interested providers, or it could be incentivizing providers to build themselves. However that works, after we gather this raw data, we'll analyze and look into that. And of course, there's tons of grant funding out there. So we'll look at all those potential opportunities, analyze those against what will be successful and best practices for the county to move forward. And we'll integrate that into the plan as well. As we move further down in the project, deliverable 3 is helping with the submission of those grants. So once we analyze the data, evaluate the path forward, then we'll help with the submission of those grants. And then of course, the full deliverable of those unserved. This is deliverable for an ArcGIS file of all those unserved addresses to the county level. And then as Nick mentioned, we do have the BAT survey going on. So not only will you understand where all the infrastructure is within the county, but the BAT survey can supplement that by talking about the adoption questions. So sometimes infrastructure runs through a specific area, but people don't adopt it, or they choose to go down other routes. And we want to understand what those needs are for members in the county. So that is really the key for this portion of the tool. And a lot of the grants out there require that as one of the additives to it. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I don't want to take up too much time, but let me know when you're seeing what I'm seeing.
We can see it.
Okay. Are you seeing this map here, scrolling in and out?
Yep.
Beautiful. So on the left-hand side, this is an example of one of the questions that's asked, but we do overlay all the questions in this fashion and do a multivariate analysis based on specific demographic sizes, needs, wants, and all those things to answer all the questions we possibly can about Tompkins County. So in this specific one, we're looking at who is your current internet service provider, and it's broken down by different townships within the county. And it just gives you kind of a detailed understanding or a good picture of exactly the kind of data we're gathering. So we overlaid this on top of the infrastructure data to get that full picture. So you can zoom in on any area, and we can have further, obviously we're having further discussions as we have these meetings as the project goes on, but the more responses we can get to this survey, the better understanding we will have of exactly what's going on within Tompkins County. So with that, I believe I am done. Nick, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I think that's a great segue here to see there's questions from the group, and if you have things that we can potentially clarify, and just encourage everybody to share the tompkinsbroadband.com link within your networks, social media, town hall, whatever format that takes. We have flyers. If you'd like, just shoot me a message. I'll put some in the mail to anywhere you like. So.
And did you say you're at 1,400 responses so far, and you want to get to 2,100?
We're actually right around 300 something responses so far. And we'd like
okay.
100. Yeah.
Okay. So we need to get the info out.
Yep. We need
okay.
a push.
Maybe I know I've seen it, but maybe Katrina can push that out to us as well, just so it's handy. So questions, comments? Thank you, Katrina. Mark?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So as I understood, you are ground truthing and updating the state information. I'm curious, did that show changes in that short amount of time? I'm wondering, around where I live, I see some of the providers out knocking on doors. I'm just curious if the landscape's changing quickly.
Differentiation between the New York State data and what we saw wasn't vast. It was relatively similar, though I will tell you, with all the grant funding that's coming out, the landscape is changing, and we're in contact all around Tompkins County, so we understand what's happening, and we'll be able to put that into our report as we move forward. So yeah, seeing providers out there knocking on doors. Yep, I know.
I mean, that's a good thing, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you. The other question, if I could, you mentioned funding opportunities, and I think you said that would be to support build out by particular ISPs. Is that right? Or are there other models you're looking at? Yep. That's my question.
So we're looking at all models and opportunities, and we're going to present all of those. Those could be anything from an open access network to a public-private partnership to incentivizing current providers or future providers. So once we gather all the raw data, we get everything put together, we'll be able to say, here's option 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is why we think certain ones are better than others, and here's the funding that could support that.
Great, thank you.
And if I may, Justin, I understand as well that the solutions could be tailored to the needs of a particular area as well. It might not just be one option that's chosen, but different options for different situations.
Precisely. Yep.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Jason?
Yeah, just the state funding that people might be thinking is going out there hasn't even started yet. The state broadband office hasn't given it. They haven't done anything. NIPA did one with the Village of Sherborne, but that's because it's being done through because they're doing their broadband project through their electric company. So if you heard about that, it has nothing to do with the broadband office necessarily. And some of the companies like Point Broadband, they were working with TCAD potentially on a grant, like getting grant money to go to Lansing, right outside the old power plant. I don't know who there was some company was being awarded that, so if it wasn't Point, I don't know who it is, but Point has fiber here and there, and they're tacking on when they can get bits and pieces of money from anybody who will give it to them, like they did with Newfield. And in Dryden, we agreed to help put a line out so we could get fiber for our project. So but just again, like most of the companies, when they're getting grant money, it's not a public asset. Becomes a private asset. So you're literally writing on the check, and there it goes. Okay.
Thanks, Jason. Other questions or comments? Katie.
Yeah, I would just add as well that Nick and I, and Jason was there as well, attended a conference in Binghamton a couple months ago and learned from the state that they are going to likely be requiring some kind of planning document around broadband to be able to access some of these funds that are coming down through the state. And our hope and intention is to turn this work by ECC into a plan. And further, our hope would be that all the entities within the county could draw on that plan to call it a plan to make themselves eligible for the money that'll be coming through the state.
Oh, that makes sense. That's good. Joel?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess I was getting at some of the things that Mark was asking about too, which is, among the options, which ones involve not simply handing money over to private entities to expand their infrastructure, which they then own.
Specifically, you'd be discussing something similar to an open access network. An open access network is county-owned infrastructure that then gets leased out to providers. What that does is it basically incentivizes specific providers to come in because they don't have that upfront cost of building out their own dark fiber rings within the county. Lower cost to the service providers allows them to provide service to other areas, and then that becomes an income resource for the county itself. So that's an open access model, essentially. The other one, public-private partnership, that's kind of a hybrid form of that. So those would be kind of two of the options. And then there's various other ones that we can look into as well. But what you're speaking about specifically, that's an open access model.
Okay, anything else? Jason, we couldn't hear you really well last time, so I don't know if there's just get closer to you.
Yeah, I can't get that much closer, but we hooked up. We have our system actually live as of yesterday.
Oh.
With our first hookup, one of the Knickerbocker business, they went live.
Okay. Mark, did I see your?
That'll come out.
Or were you just saying thumbs up? Thumbs up, Mark? That was a thumbs up. Okay. Other questions or comments?
I just offered that this is, I'm really pleased to see the direction that this is going in.
Great.
Okay.
And, yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll continue to provide updates. And if you guys have other questions, feel free to reach out to myself. And I can aim to get you answers as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and that's good work, Jason. We're applauding what Town of Dryden is doing. So now we're moving on to subcommittee liaison and other reports. I think this is a longer list than you. I don't think you need to worry too much about it. My guess is some of these reports will be pretty brief. Is there a broadband committee? I can't remember. So seeing no one who's going to report on.
Yeah, I think Joel and I were tasked as co-chairs of that. So we don't have a report.
Okay.
We did meet with Nick and discuss the county project, but I don't think we have anything to add. So.
Okay.
The upshot of that was the next coming today. So.
Well, thank you. You made it happen. Cybersecurity and municipal information technology services.
We met right before our last TCOG meeting, and we have emails out to solidify a date for another meeting. In the interim, I've circulated the town of Ulysses, a very young constituent. The town of Ulysses has circulated an RFP for IT services. We're really appreciative to the county for the assistance in doing that. And I shared it's out, it's live right now. And so we're hoping to get applicants. We've already identified 4 or 5. Part of that, the RFP process coming out of that, it's going to be some policy development. And we plan to share our findings and the best practices that we're hoping to identify as part of that provision of services with the group. What came out of our initial conversation was a perception that shared services related to software, particularly related to planning, zoning, and building and codes, might be a useful place for collaboration, particularly for the smaller municipalities. I know the town of Ithaca has invested quite a bit in that, and I don't know who else was. So I think that one of the things we'll do now that I at least put my preliminary budget to bed this week and can now turn to focus on other items is to probably do a brief survey of the members to find out what kinds of issues might be useful, because I think the subcommittee can serve the larger group without everybody having to serve on it. And we can serve as a clearinghouse maybe for information or options. So I would hopefully we can get that circulated before the end of the year so we can start getting feedback so we can move forward in 2023 with some ideas of how we might be able to work collaboratively together on some shared needs.
Did you say a happy constituent or a disgruntled constituent?
Well, more opinionated. I've got a lot of opinionated people in my family. And so that was one who he wanted to play in the dog's food, it's just not something I want to encourage during this call. The rest of the time it's fine.
So questions for Caitlin? Moving on to emergency planning and preparedness.
Sure, I'll just say a few words. I think so. Lisa alluded to the inclusion in the county budget for an emergency services program manager. And I'm trying not to say the word coordinator because that's another position that's specifically designated. So, so that came from a recommendation from our committee. I'm really appreciative to the whole committee, Rorden, Dan Lamb, Justin Van, and Mike Steitley, who have all been fantastic in their different roles in advocating for this and pushing forward for it. I think Mike gave us a report on the reception by the legislature, and that was very heartening. And I thank the legislature, and thank you, Shauna. That was just wonderful. So I think there's a widespread recognition of the need for some additional support for emergency response at a county level. And I'll just elaborate a little bit. And I also just want to acknowledge Rorden and Dan collaborated with Dan's SEPA students on the study. That was fantastic. And that built off of the earlier study by Irene Weiser and company. So the intent of this is, or a major goal, or I would say a foundational goal, is to develop a county-wide first response system that we called a fly car system that would not be transport, but would provide paramedics on the scene in a timely manner to stabilize the situation. So, again, I just can't express enough appreciation to everybody that's been involved and the support. So thank you. And I don't know if Rorden wants to say a few words or not, but, and Shauna has her hand up as well. So.
Don't really have too much to add to that. No, I appreciate Shauna in particular, as well as Rich John on the Public Safety Committee and your advocacy for it. You know, I think unfortunately there's still, I think, not adequate information that's presented publicly. I think there's a misperception about kind of who's doing the responding. I think there's still a misperception on the part of the folks, as I like to call them, that there's a widespread volunteer network of paramedics responding to calls and that they are in danger. I mean, that was the conversation maybe 20 years ago. The reality is that 97% of EMS calls in the county are answered by the 3 largest agencies, which are all paid staff. So when we see kind of the stresses to the network, it's fantastic that the county is recognizing that and looking to fill in the gaps where they exist. And I'm excited about the potential for the program moving forward. And Mike Steitley has a strong vision, I believe, for what that will look like. And now begins the actual logistics of figuring out how to staff it and pay for it and make it work. So thanks to Shauna and everyone on the legislature for giving us the opportunity to figure our way through this.
Shauna?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for doing the work and providing us with the feedback. Quite honestly, you made this a very, very easy vote. It was very obvious the way that we needed to go. The collaboration was really important, and it was good to see municipalities come together, different parties come together, and really try and figure this out for our community. I think the one thing that I want to bring to the forefront, I know that there was an article done by the Ithaca Voice and it dropped the word fly car. And I think that makes me a little bit nervous because we're not there yet, right? Because this position is really to coordinate services and to have the conversations and to look at the data and to try and move us forward. The one thing that I noticed after the article is that I had Marty Stallone actually contacted me from the hospital and said, hey, we weren't part of any of this conversation and we're one of the main healthcare providers. I guess they're providing some services in Schuyler in regards to, I don't know if it's EMS services or transportation services, but he did mention that he would like to be part of the conversation. And so I would like to, kind of gift that to all of you that are part of this conversation and part of the process. And I know I did a ride along with Bangs last week, and it was absolutely incredible to see the collaboration of Ithaca Police, Cuba Heights Fire Department, Bangs. I mean, there are no words that can describe the amazing work that is done amongst our volunteer services, our paid services. I mean, it was almost like a symphony to see everyone come together. And I was able to experience their fly car and how they use that. And so I want to make sure I don't want to step on anyone's toes whenever we talk about fly car, because I realize that people are really sensitive about that. So I wanted to throw that out there, and I want to make sure that all the parties are involved whenever we talk about the collaboration, because I don't want anyone's feelings hurt or people to feel like we've left them out. So.
Great. Thank you, Shauna. That's good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I like your terminology. I'm going to borrow that, where you heard some feedback and you're gifting it to. I like that. I'm going to gift you this information.
Rorgan has a comment. Yeah.
Oh, just Shauna, I think for another time, I think you and Mike and I should have a conversation about that. I'm pretty well aware of what CMC is doing vis-a-vis Schuyler Hospital and Schuyler County, and that topic was discussed in our committee. So we should probably discuss that at some point.
Yeah, that sounds great. Sure.
Anything else on this topic or from the committee?
Yeah, no, that's it from me. Thanks, Rod.
Okay. Energy Committee. So we have held 2 webinars sponsored by the TCOG Energy Committee. They were both focused on solar. The first one, I can't remember the timing of when TCOG met, but the first one was focused on municipal perspectives and lessons learned working with solar developers. It's very well attended. I think we had 30 some people who were part of that Zoom webinar. 4 or 5 municipalities spoke about their experiences. So that was great. And then just on Monday, we heard from 3 solar development companies and how they see working with Tompkins County municipalities. We also had a NYSEG representative on the line. So I thought it was less attended, but maybe 15 people. I thought it was a good webinar. So I think we've done our work I don't think we're doing anything else between now and the end of the year. So the Energy Committee focused on solar. And I do want to mention that the county is going to keep putting together webinars that will be of use to those interested in energy. The next one is next Wednesday. Hopefully you've all seen this at 5:30, and it's an overview of the model battery energy storage system. So if you're interested in learning more about energy storage, battery energy storage, next Wednesday at 5:30. And I'm sure you can, if you didn't get it, I know it's being sent out through TCOG, but just look for that information. So that's it from the Energy Committee. Transportation?
Yes, the Transportation Committee has not met since our last meeting. I jotted some notes down. I will send them along to Katrina, so I won't belabor the meeting. A couple things regarding the TCAT system. You may know that on October 22nd, the city of Ithaca, Tompkins County, and Tompkins Consolidated Area Transit announced renewal of their mutual operating agreement. The new 10-year agreement runs through October of 2032 with an option for 2 5-year renewals. The previous agreement was signed in 2005. According to that joint statement issued by county government, quote, the new agreement affirms that each underwriter has the right to vet proposals from the TCAT Board of Directors seeking an extraordinary or substantial investment, such as building a new transit facility or deciding to go fare free. That's a statement from the county. So one can see that some of the heavy lifting and some of the tough decisions, tough questions are going to be resolved later. The second is not so pleasant, and that's regarding the TCAT schedule reductions that are a result of a maintenance backlog and a shortage of mechanics. You probably read about that. I talked yesterday, sent an email to Scott Vanderpool, the TCAT general manager. He told me the following: we are doing everything we can to get the bus situation rectified. Really an all-out effort to do everything to help our mechanics during this mechanic shortage we are facing. And those are his words. And that's my report.
Any questions? Any questions about I didn't allow you to ask any questions about the Energy Committee. Any questions about either transportation or energy committees? Mark?
Hey, Rod, I'll just ask, were there any revelations in the webinar with the solar developers?
Yeah. Of course, I always going to have, Joe, you were on it, right? I think that NYSEG was pretty upfront. There was some back and forth about where do the limitations stem from? And how do we move forward? So Tim Lynch was on the webinar from NYSEG, and I think that they're really, Joe, I got the impression that they're really trying to figure out how to improve the situation in terms of siting solar, but there's some limitations.
The one that was most was new to me was that under current law, any upgrades of the distribution system is at the developer's expense. If you propose to site a solar farm someplace where the capacity doesn't exist, adding the capacity is all at their expense, and that's $1 million a mile. So it doesn't take very many miles from your where the adequate line capacity is to basically make it financially infeasible for certain locations to be included in the possibilities. The other thing that was shared was, where the capacity exists currently, what's undeveloped. And it's a surprisingly small number of places in the county that are not already accounted for in projects that are in the pipeline or who are planning to be and have taken the, sort of, I guess you get your spot even before the proposals emerged and the municipalities are told about them, so that they shop, where could they go, and Rod, do you remember whether there was only a couple of places?
Yeah, I don't know. So it was Norbit Solar. I think David Norbit put on the table. He didn't think there was much other places that weren't already identified that could be developed for solar. I think there might have been some disagreement from at least one of the other solar developers. It was recorded. If anyone wants the link, just send me an email and I'll send you the link.
Great, thank you.
Both of those webinars were, very instructive. I think advanced the conversation considerably.
Yeah, I know the town, we're updating our solar law, so both of them gave us some additional information to think about what to update in terms of our solar law. So, water quality. Is there any report from water quality? I don't think that is an active committee right now. Is there anything else that we need to talk about before we talk about our next meeting? Anything that folks want to share in general or update the group on? And I believe, Katrina, our next meeting is December 1st. And I know of at least, well, I think a couple of updates will come out of this meeting. I do know that Jeff Smith plans on being at that meeting to give us an update on how the different highways across the county are collaborating and coordinating efforts. So Jeff will be at our December meeting to give us that update. I don't know what else is on do we have anything else on the docket right now, Katrina?
No, just Jeff Smith was the only thing. And then I wrote down that Darby was going to provide an update from this meeting.
Right.
And I don't know if I was going to reach out to you afterwards if we want to touch base with Mike Steitley and see if he has any update on the county comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Maybe invite him.
So other ideas for the December 1st? Can't believe we're even talking about December.
Yeah, right.
December 1st. Mark.
Is it time to start thinking about leadership transition or changes?
So I guess Joel, you and Joe and I should get together over the next few weeks. So yeah, thank you, Mark, for reminding us, because we will. So Joel, anyway, we'll update everyone the next time. It's a little confusing to me, but I know Joel's in the line to become TCOG co-chair, right, Joel?
Yes, yeah.
So we'll have to find a new Joel to come on up through the
Okay.
ranks.
Is it you
So
or
if anyone's
Joe?
if anyone's interested, start thinking about it and let us know. Anything else that we need to discuss today, since we're all together? We did much better on the timing than I thought we were going to do. And hopefully no one minds that we'll be done by 4:30, apparently. I thought we would be going till 5. Okay, I guess we will adjourn then at close to 4:30. Take care. Have a good
Okay.
evening.
Thanks, Rod.
too.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. Yep.